Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dr. Araceli Hernandez LaRoche. I'm a professor at USC Upstate, and I serve on the Presidential Search Committee as the USC System Representative. Before I introduce our distinguished guest, please know that this forum is live streamed. When you come up and ask questions, please ask those questions clearly so that everyone in this room and virtually can hear you. After the 30-minute presentation, we'll have about 20 minutes, so you can approach the microphones. I would now like to introduce our presidential candidate, Dr. Jay Walsh, Vice President for Research at Northwestern University. Dr. Walsh has also served on the Naval Research Advisory Committee and as the Secretary of the new Navy Advisory Panel. Welcome, Dr. Walsh.
Thank you for that introduction. And one other thank you is there are a lot of people here who are orchestrating events today, moving me around campus, videoing, recording, and I know that takes an awful lot of work. The search committee, that takes a lot of work as well. So thank you all very much for all your efforts for the university and, personally for me as well. So thank you. And that hospitality that I just spoke of didn't start here. It started at 30,000 feet. When I flew in from Chicago to here, I flew in on Saturday night. And I sat in a seat and I ended up getting moved, which is really always charming in a flight. And they said, well, there's a seat back further, just go find it. It's a young lady sitting back there who was probably hoping to get 2 seats out of this deal. This guy shows up and sits down right next door. So, she merrily read her book, and I merrily worked on a few things maybe related to what I'm doing here today. And about halfway through the flight, she said, I hate to look like I'm intruding on what you're doing, but are you one of the candidates that's coming down and interviewing? So she's one of your seniors in the College of Education. She can't be here today because she's student teaching, as they do in their senior year. She's teaching kindergartners right now. We had a great conversation about the College of Education, a great conversation about South Carolina, which is where she is not from. That's why she was flying in. A conversation about students from out of state coming to a great state institution. So my experience this weekend started on a flight, and it has been nothing but fantastic the entire time. And so, no matter how this all goes, I am walking out of here with an incredible, strong impression of the place. This is advertised as a 30-minute presentation. I'm not that type of person. I'll give you some framing and give you a little bit of background on who I am and how I think about things. I would much rather have this as a conversation. That's how I work, is I work through conversations. I don't have a presumption to know what is of interest to you. I like to hear what's of interest to you, and we can do that through question and answer and back and forth. So, with a little luck, I'll go fast in 30 minutes. We'll see how that all goes. Let me start by things that aren't in an academic CV, which is that curriculum vitae, resume, whatever you want to call it, is what is online. That's pretty minimalistic view of me. It's very academic. I went to 2 colleges in Cambridge, and I moved for 30 years to a place in Chicago and did a few other things. I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up in a small town south of Boston called Foxborough. There's always a chuckle when I say that. I don't know whether to be deflated or... But I'm in a warmer place, so that won't happen anymore. No, seriously. For those of you who don't know what that whole little back and forth. The New England Patriots play there, and apparently they don't know how to blow up footballs. Who knew? I played football, but it was football. I played soccer as a kid growing up. I was very lucky to have, as a friend whose father was an immigrant, and he came from Germany, and he had played semi-pro ball and soccer in Germany. So I got to be inspired early in life by, in this case, a soccer coach. And that's been a theme in my life, you know, to run into people who can inspire me to move forward. And it's very much of my view of what we do as academics, is we inspire our students, and frankly, we inspire our colleagues to reach ever higher and do a little bit more, maybe a lot more, than we thought we could do. I stopped playing soccer when I was about 40. My knees couldn't hack it anymore, and I continue to run, though. Soccer's a running sport. So I do 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. I've even done Boston. That's the marathon twice. Qualified for that. My suspicion is if I end up with a job that I'm here to talk to you about, I will not have time to train for those. But that tells you something about my view also of athletics. Athletics is the front porch of a university. Everybody sees the front porch. We don't always see, you know, the engineering school, the medical school, the education school, unless you happen to be on a flight. So, you know, that is an important part of what a university does. I recognize that and embrace it. And that's what we have at universities in this country, and certainly within the SEC. One of the other things we have in universities is our clientele, 1/4 of it turns over every year. There are very few industries where your clientele turns over fully every 4 years. We're not going to talk about the PhD students who take longer. I get it. I understand that. But you know, that vitality that hits a campus late summer every year inspires me. You know, I wander around the campus I'm on now all summer, and you know, it's fine, it's wonderful. I love the faculty, I love the grad students, but when those undergrads show up for us in September, it is just fantastic. The place has this uplifting sense to it. That's why I like academia. So, you know, there's sort of a question that isn't on the table, but I'm going to put it on the table. Why do I want this job? One answer to that is I love academia. I love the mission of academia. I love the fact that we teach the next generation. I love the fact that we discover new knowledge. And I love the fact that we bring service to the community. So, and you know, for those of you who look at me and say, well, he's the vice president for research, what does he have to do with students? It has everything to do with students. The product that we have when we do research is certainly new knowledge and the advancement of our own fields as academics. But it's also graduates who are involved in that research while they're here on campus. That can be as graduate students, and it can be as undergraduates. And if you're doing it right, you pull the undergraduates into your research operation. You teach them how to look at questions. This is what I really like about academia. It doesn't answer the question, why the University of South Carolina? So what do I see? I see a fantastic campus here in Columbia. The more I've gotten to know about Columbia, the more I see the strengths here. I had heard about the Honors College from a variety of sources for over a number of years. So I knew there was excellence there. But as I have gone around, I have seen other areas where there is also excellence. And that's how you grow an institution, is you find where its strengths are, and you build those strengths, you fortify those strengths, and then you build on those strengths beyond there. Certainly that's what we have done within Northwestern, which is where I'm from right now. We try to identify the strengths, and we try to build on those. It is very difficult, frankly, for any institution, certainly for an academic institution, to de novo invent a new area that it's going to be strong in. That's an expensive operation, and it's very challenging to find the talent that you need from the outside. So, what I like is this fantastic core here within, the state capital, as well as the system of regional campuses. This is an interesting way, a different way, I think the right way to put together a system where there is the ability to coordinate between the regional campuses and the central unit. Not every state has that ability to coordinate. There's not the communication set up in the structure of the system that allows that to happen. My impression is that it is happening. My view is that we can continue to push that forward even further. I also see a state that is looking at its universities, and in this case, this university, and asking it to be world-class. There is certainly going to be a conversation about how that can happen and what resources are needed and what barriers that are inhibiting that to happen are in place. But that conversation about goals, mission, goals, and resources and barriers is a conversation that I think needs to happen. I think it probably is happening, and it needs to happen more so that there can be alignment between what the folks in the state legislature, which I hear are very active here, and the university as a whole. That alignment needs to happen. My view is that's a conversation that starts when there isn't a crisis, and that you build from there until there is good alignment between the two. The other thing that I would say is I've noted a culture at the University of South Carolina that is a culture that, frankly, I like. A culture where people care for each other. And when I've met with students, this is what they list as one of their top items, is that they care for each other, they set up means by which they can help each other. And they talk to me about the administration, the staff, and the faculty who are empowered to do the same thing for them. So that culture of caring is a really nice culture, and frankly, a culture that I really would be interested in joining. So thank you for having that here already. The last thing I would say is there's a sort of a two-sided coin, two sides to this coin that I'm going to talk about. You have a president who is, by all measures that I can see, beloved here. Has been successful. The students certainly talk in raving terms about him. That's a tough act to follow. I recognize this, okay? It'd be nice if I had some help with this too, but we can get to that at the appropriate time. There's another side to that coin. He was successful. This tells me the next president of this university also can be successful. There is no reason that can't happen. Won't necessarily be the same type of person, okay? And that's not me coding anything, okay? That's just a statement of reality. But he was successful, and that's exciting as a candidate, to look and see that you can be successful, that you can grow an institution, and you can move it forward. Certainly, I had some components of that when I took my current job 11 years ago. We had been growing the research operation at the university, and I'm going to give one metric, but I don't fully think that you can describe research with one metric, and it's a dollar metric. But I can tell you that all the other metrics are also increasing. We had about 417 million, about 417. Like that's a rounded number. 417 million the year before I started this job. Last year, we reported 702 million. So it's a 68% increase in 11 years. This has been an exciting job for me, to work with faculty, to work with deans, to work with postdocs, work with students, to build that operation. It is invigorating for me. I wake up every morning and I think about this on my run. I certainly think about this all day, moving this forward. I would love to do the same thing here. I would love to come here. I would love to understand the strengths. I would love to talk with the faculty and the students and the postdocs. And you have medical schools, so there's medical residents and fellows. You have regional campuses and work with them and build an ever stronger university. So, I hope you also got a sense of my style here. I am not one who likes to sit in an office. It drives my assistant a little bit nuts because it means I'm all over campus, and she's got to figure out how to move me around. You know, Eric, I need somebody like you to just come along and grab me and say, okay, we're going. But you know, I typically go alone, so nobody's there grabbing me. And you know, that's how I work. I need to see where people are in their own environment, whether that's faculty, postdocs, students, deans. That's how I like to run things. That does not mean that we don't have meetings in my place, because people like to come and see where I live also. So I recognize there's that trade-off. But that really speaks to an important part of who I am, and that is I like conversations. I like building those relationships. And I like building them so that I understand where faculty want to go, what resources are needed so that they can move forward. And I'm going to do the same thing with students. I'm going to figure out what they want, what they need, and then find ways, to the extent possible, and that exists now, and it'll exist, you know, in the future too, of getting resources to move those ideas forward. I also have a framework that I think of regularly when I'm looking at growing, strengthening, fortifying, building, whatever words you would like to use, a unit within an academic environment. It starts with trying to understand where we're headed. I just spoke about that. That's the core. But then there are a variety of components around that. First and most important is talent. Recruiting and retaining faculty, recruiting students, recruiting and developing staff. That's absolutely vital for an academic institution. The next thing you need is a space for those folks to work. It's not, you know, sometimes it's inspiring, that space, and sometimes it's just plain functional. Sometimes it would be really nice to just have functional space. And I have faculty come to me on a regular basis. Hey, can we make this space functional? You don't have to build me anything new. Can we just like get the lights and the heat to work? And that chuckle tells me, you know, you don't have a, maybe you know. You also need facilities, you know, shared facilities. The original shared facility is a library. You don't need all the books in your office. You can share books. You can share lots of things in academia. You can share equipment, you can share computer facilities. It's nice to have your own laptop, I get that. But if you need something bigger, you know, you can share that. We don't, as academics, need to own our own everything. So building this shared facility environment has been a focus of mine and a focus of the universities. It allows us to bring in a research sense, the equipment, but also computing facilities, resources within libraries and museums. And it allows you to bring those in a scale that you wouldn't be able to do if they were dispersed across individuals in the university, because not everybody, therefore, would know where all those were. So we try to combine that together. And I would say also that, you know, a library, again, is the perfect example, that it's not just about the stuff in the library, it's about the people. It's about the peoples that you can talk with that allow you to access these facilities and allow you to work with those facilities. So that was the librarians. We do a lot of work in developing the staff within our cord facilities, and in fact send some of them off to learn in areas that have nothing to do with their technical background, for example, in the business area. Okay, so talent, space, core facilities. You need staff. You need to have collaborative spaces. The ability to collaborate within the university and increasingly outside the university. The student I was sitting with, she's not taking classes right now within the university. She's out taking advantage of the fact that there's a kindergarten that would love to have her help and from which she can learn. So this ability to collaborate with, in her case, with the local school systems, with businesses, with state institutions. Some of them are right here, some of them are a little further down the street. But that ability to collaborate, again, we don't need to own everything. You can look outside and leverage the opportunities that exist outside the university. There also is a need for entrepreneurial activity. This didn't exist on the list of needs within a university 30 years ago. A few universities, but not many. Now it is becoming the norm within most research universities to be able to have entrepreneurial activity, and I am not talking just about STEM. Our most innovative group historically has been our theater department. If you look at theater in Chicago, there's about 150 theater companies, and about 75% of them are run by Northwestern graduates. They were either started by or run by Northwestern graduates. That's entrepreneurship. That's starting your own company. And it doesn't have to be in STEM. It can be in the arts, it can be in the humanities, and it can be in the social sciences. The last thing that you absolutely need as you go around, I put this all in a circle for what it's worth, that's going through my head right now, is you need resources, you need money. Okay? And there's some money coming in, but you have to ask yourself on a regular basis, what are the other revenue streams? If you want to do something and there isn't the funds available, then the question is, where do you get them? Certainly you can ask within the institution, but the federal government does a reasonable amount of funding in a whole variety of areas. There's also foundations, there are companies, there's NGOs, there's state government, not just federal government. We also get some from local governments. So, there's this whole range, and having an infrastructure that helps find that and move that forward is really helpful. And, having a culture of people who, have great ideas and then helping them find ways to move those ideas forward. That's what I like building. That's what I would love to bring here. Okay, so that's a strategy. A focus of mine is on strategy. There's also a focus on a couple of other areas. I would say there's a focus for me on diversity and inclusion. That's hard for you to look at me and see that. I am fully aware of that. I am not standing here and you thinking I'm diverse and inclusive. I am who I am. That's it. But there is no way anybody does a job, either in my current job or the one I'm here talking with you for, without building a team that is way broader than whatever I am. So, and you can ask, have you done this? And the answer is yes, I have. I have a fantastic team back at Northwestern. I have a team of 8 associate vice presidents who regularly challenge me. I'm an engineer by background. There is one other engineer on that team. There are some scientists on that team. There's a humanist on that team. There's a lawyer on that team. And there's a medical doctor on that team. So there's diversity in the disciplines. There's underrepresented minorities on that team. And additionally, there are 3 people who were not born in this hemisphere on that team. And the key, in my mind, to that is to empower that group to tell me when they see things differently. It's not always comfortable to be told that you're wrong. But actually, I can't tell you how important it is for me to hear that from them, that I'm looking at things with a lens that they see differently. And, you know, I think that's a really important part of, you know, of this job, is to build a diverse and inclusive team and to empower that team to give views, to put forward proposals, and to challenge the system. I can't change who I am, but I can go out and I can be really proactive and have been historically in building a team that has this range of diversity. A couple other things I've mentioned already. Talent. I think it's very important to develop talent. That includes faculty, it includes staff, and certainly what we do is regular day jobs as faculty when we develop the talent in the students. As a president, there's also a fundraising component. I've spent a reasonable amount of time doing that, not only writing grants, which we've been very successful at, but also with donors. And that's a matter of alignment of donor interests with the interest of, frankly, the faculty. Because at the end of the day, that's who is going to effectuate the activity that occurs with those donations. And I realize not all the money goes into academic side, there goes into other parts of the university as well. It can go into student services, so there has to be alignment with that. It can also go into athletics, so there has to be an alignment with that. Point is, align our needs as a university with the desires of the donors. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't make a quick statement about economic development. Most universities in this day and age are being asked to be part of economic development. Certainly we have in the historic past. My view of this is that we do economic development by providing the foundation upon which that development happens. That foundation is we train students who go out and have the ability to change the world. And we create new knowledge that can go out and be part of new ventures that exist. But we need to remember what our core is. Our core is that we teach, we do research, and we also do service. And if we do that core well, then the economic development can happen. It does have to be intentional, but it doesn't have to be done outside of our core. And where I see institutions getting a little outside of themselves is when they push economic development in ways that are beyond the core of what we do as a university. I have certainly been involved in economic development within Northwestern. I can see that happening here as well. And I would say that economic development is not only good for the community, but if you have a strong economy around your university, then you have a much higher probability of attracting talent to that university. And that talent is interested, or, very frankly, I can't remember a case in the last couple of years where we didn't have a second spouse involved in the recruitment. And having a strong economic base around your university allows you to attract talent as well as bring in their spouses. So, core, teach, research, service, that's what I will focus on. That's what I have focused on. And now I'm at a point where I welcome questions from the audience. I think there are microphones. I can also bring you a microphone if that helps. So tell you what, we're going to start here in the middle, and then we can move around, and I'm never going to be able to move this. It's too attached. Oh, here you go. Sorry. Yeah. Hiding on the fringes. That's okay. You can go first.
So I've been here for many, many years, and all those years we've tried, I think, to visualize ourselves as raising to an AAU university.
Yep.
I hope you have a vision of how to do this. I know it's not easy. I've seen other universities that have struggled with it. Very competitive.
It is. So the AAU, the American Association of Universities, is 62 universities in the United States. There's 2 in Canada, actually, so 60 plus 2. And the turnover in the AAU is pretty slow. You know, it's a nimble little organization. But you know, I mean, Georgia Tech joined not that long ago, Boston University also. Look, the metrics associated with that, one is the one I mentioned, which is dollars, sponsored research dollars. There's also a number of other metrics that need to move forward and frankly take time, okay? So awards that faculty get, citations, publications, PhD students that are graduated, postdocs that are in residence, and I don't think I'm missing anything. Something on, there's a few other smaller ones. That has to be an intentional play. And very candidly, it's very research-based. If you look at all those, you know, undergraduate teaching is not in any of those. Now, you can't be in the AAU unless you do undergraduate teaching, so there are a few, UC, San Francisco is not in the list of AAUs because it doesn't have an undergraduate component, as one example. So I think, you know, there would have to be, clearly there would have to be a discussion if that is the goal, and that would be a discussion with the state legislature because there are resource needs that are associated with that goal. What that goal would provide, you know, the off-the-cuff original sell, is that goal will provide a research foundation upon which economic development will occur, upon which a more robust economy surrounding the university will occur, and upon which the state will be able to grow. But there are resources that are needed in order to get there. There are a variety of sources, it's not just the state. And it also requires a commitment within the university of how the resources are expended, distributed within the university. I say it requires a conversation because this has to be owned by all of us. You have to own that this is what you want to do. And that commitment, you know, it would be great to, you know, have a president come in and say this is the goal. But, you know, I'm not going to stand here and do that because I'm going to say this is something that we're going to have to decide on together so that we all have that mission if that's the mission you want. Okay?
Hi, Dr. Walsh.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being with us today and welcome to South Carolina. My name is Megan and I'm a senior here in the Honors College. And before I pose a specific question to you, I did want to raise an issue that many of the students and I had with the university search process as a whole. In its 218-year history, the University of South Carolina has had 28 presidents. Some of them were remembered and some left little mark on this place. But they all shared this. All of the past 28 presidents of the University of South Carolina have been men. The search committee appointed to identify the next president was 82% male. The committee selected 11 male semifinalists and then 4 finalists who also were all men. We are not attacking the qualifications of these candidates. We are criticizing the process that led to their selection. this university takes pride in the makeup of its student body, and though 55% of undergraduates on this very campus are women, they lacked equal representation in this process. The president is the face of our institution and represents USC to the outside world. The president is a reflection of the university, and yet we were given a search committee that looked nothing like the body it was supposed to represent, and they gave us a finalist pool that is not representative of the students they are trying to lead. Though we noticed the inequality in this committee in the fall, we chose not to act because the committee expressed an interest in diversity. We gave them the benefit of the doubt and trusted that they would deliver. They have failed, and now we're speaking up. Today, we represent 30 student organizations and nearly 40 faculty from across the USC Columbia campus. We are faith groups and pre-professional organizations, student activists, and social clubs. Our organizations have different goals, different memberships, and often very different opinions. But we are united in our outrage at the inability of the selection committee to produce a representative pool of finalists. The search committee did not look like us, and as a result, neither do the finalists. We are calling on the trustees of this university to add more diverse voices to the search committee to make it representative of the university. We ask for more transparency and an honest conversation about why there is such an absence of female representation. We are calling on this new committee to reform their methods, to fix what caused them to miss qualified women for this position, and to return with a diverse pool of finalists that are qualified to lead this university. You cannot be what you cannot see. If the role of this university is to train the future leaders of our state, our country, our world, USC cannot continue to leave over half of its students unrepresented and present an image that hides, excludes, and marginalizes women. For all the strides women have made over the years, and we congratulate this university on enrolling and employing women at high rates. Sexual violence, discrimination, and harassment are still rampant in our society and this university. This moment, this presidential search, is an inflection point and a chance for USC to rectify 2 centuries of unequal representation. USC boasts that there are no limits to what we can learn, experience, and achieve, yet its highest office has been limited exclusively to men. By maintaining an all-male presidency, the university is placing limitations on women and their ability to have their voices heard at the highest echelons of USC. It has been 218 years. If we do not use this opportunity to shatter these limits now, when will we? That is the question that we pose to this university today. We also want to ask you, Dr. Walsh, as we acknowledge that you are part of this process and not responsible for the makeup of the search committee. You mentioned diversity inclusion in your speech, but you did not mention anything about gender. Do you have any experience working with women's issues, and how will you promote females to the highest parts of this university?
So I guess I forgot to mention and should have. So thank you for that statement, okay? I think it's really important that those in this community who have important views bring them forward. This also tells me something about the culture here, in the sense that you can bring this forward in this forum, and you're fully accepted as you're making these comments, okay? So, you know, again, I go back to the culture of the university. It's good that that's here. I forgot to mention, very importantly, that of those 8 associate vice presidents that I hired, 3 are men, 5 are women, okay? I hired for excellence. I hired for excellence. What came out of that is just what you mentioned, in that women rose into those positions. Society has reached a point where when you work to hire for excellence, you're going to get a diverse group. You should be pushing this. You should be happy that that's happening. Frankly, when I was your age, that wasn't the case, not because women weren't capable. It's just they weren't represented. My engineering classes were 10% women. It's very different now. So, yeah, you should bring these issues forward. And the next thing I would say is, I don't know, given what you just said, where this moves forward. But don't disappear if I am back here. I would love to work with you and everybody else who stood up here. And I say that from the core of my heart.
Thank you very much for your response.
Yep.
My name is Esther McCartney, and I'm a doctoral student in the School of Education. My program did not have a research assistantship, so I'm expected to do research for my own professional development on my own, but also have a graduate assistantship to fund my studies. So I kind of have a two-part question. One is additional funding for research and education, and how you could address the disparities there. Two, in my GA across campus, I make $13,000. That's my package, whereas my cohort members make $20,000. That's a huge disparity.
Yep.
I have to work harder with fewer resources, and it impacts my life. And that departments are allowed to establish their own funding and set bars low is abominable. How would you address that issue?
So first, I have met with students, including PhD students, while here on campus, and I have heard of some of these issues, but not quite in the depth that you just presented it. It's hard for me to stand here today and give you an in-depth answer. I'm sure you understand that. What you're looking for is a broader, I think, answer, which is the administration broadly writ looking at disparities that exist, inequalities that exist across the university for its PhD student population? I think that's the place to start. Maybe it has started. As I said, I don't know the details here and don't want to get out over my skis, as they say. But I think you start with, given the information I have, there is some need to look at this, and that's where I would start, is looking at what disparities exist within the graduate student population.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Walsh, thank you for coming today. My name is Mark Benoit. I'm a senior here at the University of South Carolina. I'll be graduating in a couple weeks. For the 4 years that I've been here, I've had the opportunity to be able to work within state government at the State House, and the university has afforded me great opportunities. But with that, I've also recognized that the university and the state General Assembly have failed to align, as you mentioned in your presentation, to move in a direction where state funding has been increased, where tuition costs have been able to decrease, and that's all, frankly, because of the 2008 economic recession and state cutback funding. Whereas cutback funding on everything, it just hasn't restored it to state-funded universities. Right. With you not being from South Carolina, with you not having experience working with the South Carolina General Assembly, what do you think you can bring to the table as far as building those relationships with the leaders of the General Assembly, with the governor, with the federal delegation, to make sure that those resources are indeed met for future generations of students?
Yeah. So, look, there's always pros and cons to not being in the system. The pro is that there's no negative history of me working with that group. Maybe that'll change quickly. Maybe that's happening right now. So sorry for everybody out there who's offended by that. Look, I look for win-win situations. That's what I look for. I look to explain where we can move forward. This is not the only state that has had cuts in higher educational funding from their state that have not rebounded after the Great Recession. Certainly this one hasn't rebounded from everything that I can see. Again, there's only so much digging you can do from the outside. But I would have the conversations, and I would not start the conversation by saying we need more money. I've never found that that is a way to move forward in any conversation. Whether it was me as a teenager with my parents, whether it was as a parent listening to my kids, I wanted to hear, and whether it's anywhere else in the spectrum, I need to hear where you want to go. So I'll give you an example of this. When I go out and visit faculty, or when they come and visit me, I always start that conversation with, tell me what you're doing that's really exciting. I want to understand what your goals are. I want to understand how, when you achieve those goals, what's going to change. That's how I start the conversations. I want to understand where the faculty are going. And I think, when I talk with people around this state, the conversation's going to start with, this is what this university is about. And this is what a great university can do for society. Now, you tell me, what do you view as important from this university? Because look, that's a different perspective. There's a diversity of opinions, and my guess is there are plenty of opinions around this state as to what universities should do and how they should be funded. I need to hear that. I need to understand the basis for that. And then we can move forward to the issue of, how are we going to resource what we see as necessary for the university in service of the state and more broadly society.
Thank you.
Yep. Hi.
Good afternoon, Dr. Walsh. Earlier today, you defined inclusion and equity for a group of students that was here earlier.
Yep.
I would like to know, when minority students come to campus, sometimes they feel as if the current campus climate is not welcoming towards their respective identities. What are some techniques, initiatives, or plans you would use to ensure that each historically marginalized group of students feels like they're at home at USC? Okay,
so I would start with, let's have a conversation about what is not happening now. Why is there a sense of that they're not welcome and they're not included? I need to start with that understanding. I can't solve a problem until I actually understand the problem. My suspicion is that it's a little longer than what we have for right here. I would certainly welcome that conversation. And then you move on to understanding what changes can be made so that we want to make this an inclusive environment for every high school student in South Carolina. Every one of them has to feel like I could go there if I achieve academically at a high enough level. That needs to happen. That needs to be part of the conversation. So I am really glad you brought that up. And, and if I'm here in the fall, we can have that conversation. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Walsh, Dr. Lois Duke Whitaker, I was a little bit late getting in, and you may have already addressed this in your opening comments. If so, please forgive me.
It's okay.
According to our own Commission on Higher Education, tuition at the University of South Carolina is #2 in the nation when it comes to public universities. South Carolina is also the 8th state in the nation when it comes to student debt. I'm sure you have researched this and are aware of this. My question to you is, knowing this, why did you want to come, or do you want to come, to the University of South Carolina?
Eric, is the car running? Look, what you bring up is actually an issue that, you put the focus on the University of South Carolina. I think it's actually an issue for our entire industry, very candidly. I mean, we've had a GDP that's growing 2 or 3% a year for a long time, and we have been raising tuition 4.5%. And it's not just here, it's a lot of places that tuition has increased over that time period. And I don't see that as sustainable for families in the United States. So, the question that's going to have to be broached is, where are we going to put our resources so that we can achieve the goals that we want to achieve? And, you know, it's hard for me to sit here and say how we can make cuts. I am certainly not going to stand here and say, well, we're going to cut this and this and this. That's crazy. I can't dig deep enough into that. I'm certainly not going to stand here and say we're going to cut anything. Okay? That is something that one can't do with the information that any candidate, frankly, has. And if the other candidates have it, then, you know, then I'm impressed. Okay? But, you know, I've been in a big academic institution for long enough to know that there's always pushes and tugs on resources. So, you know, you're asking a question about the revenue side, and I'm talking about the expense side. This is a teeter-totter that has to be balanced. And that balance is a conversation that we need to have so that we can understand. Maybe what we do, you know, others have done this, is just say, well, we're not going to grow tuition for a couple of years, but what implications? What are the unintended or intended consequences of doing that? Yes, there are certain efficiencies that any institution can, you know, can look at. You know, the real question is what inefficiencies do you want to look at, and where do you want to move things? I do think that in the next 5 to 10 years, that the question you just raised is going to be a question that will be in front of the administration here. I am fully aware of that. I am not one to shy away from challenges. Maybe you heard me say that about success. Okay, and very candidly, that's a challenge to follow your current president. But this challenge and several others are going to come forward. So I am aware of this. And it is not just here, it is other places as well. So you put a point on why are you coming to South Carolina, and I would broaden that and say, why the heck would you want to lead anything in academia? And the answer is because academia is the basis for a great society. It's one of the set of institutions in this country that makes this country as good as it really is. So I want to be part of continuing to build that. Hope that's an okay answer.
Hi, Dr. Walsh. I'm Heather Brandt. I'm Associate Dean in the Graduate School and a Professor of Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior. I appreciate your comments about the end result of convening a diverse and inclusive team. Yep. I'm curious about your process to get there. Given the comments read so astutely by the students previously, we know today that when you come to campus, you are going to be charged with identifying a new provost, a new chief communications officer, a new chief financial officer, and those are just the ones we know today. So I'm interested in how you will go about with that process.
The similar way that I've done this in the past, and that is to look for excellence in all the places it exists, to really go out and find excellence. And it exists in places that aren't usually looked in. Okay? And, you know, that's how I've done this in the past. And, you know, that requires conversations with a whole group of people, understanding who is really good, who's under a rock that hasn't been turned over by somebody else.
Thank you.
Okay? And yeah, that's how this has worked in the past. You know, I mean, I'm making it sound like I actually know what I'm doing here. This is hard. This is not easy. You know, it's just so much simpler to say, well, you know, we're going to do a provost search, and here's the search committee, and, you know, go off and bring back a great candidate or 2 or 5. Okay? I think that is not the full process. You know, I'm a little hesitant here because I am aware that there are state regulations about this. I'm fully aware of why there are 4 of us this week. I don't know what other regulations I have to follow. You know, I haven't dug that deep into a variety of codes. But I'm also not hesitant to break outside of bounds. You know, some of you have heard me talk at other forums about my interactions while I've been here already. Those weren't scripted. Eric wasn't driving me around. That's also who I am. I'm gonna push. It's just it's what you get.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Walsh. My name is Rick Ackerman. 10 years ago, my wife and I moved to Columbia, South Carolina without having any prior relationship with the state, the city, or the university.
Yep.
During this time, we have been welcomed here, as I hope you will be during your stay, this maybe temporarily or maybe permanently. During this time, I have been an occasional student. I have been a member of neighborhood associations and also become a donor. My question to you is relating to the focus of what you've said so far, which I view as basically looking inward into the university. I would like you to look outward into the neighborhoods. We have an area not far from this campus which is unsafe. It's unsafe for our students. It's unsafe for our neighborhoods. We are, as students and residents, in some degree of peril almost all the time, especially in the evenings. We've had some tragedies here, fortunately. Not an overwhelming number, but more than zero is a bad number. And my question is, since the university is the largest resident of this neighborhood, we need, as a community, the university to stand up with all its might and fight for the safety and the congeniality, property, etc., of the residents as well as the students. And my question to you is pretty simple. What do you know about this? And what do you see as potential ways to alleviate the problems that the neighborhood experiences along with the university?
Are we talking 5 points?
We're talking 5 points.
Yeah. I was there yesterday.
I happen to live 1 block from 5 points.
I happened to be there yesterday. And to be really candid and clear, it wasn't to take in any alcoholic beverages. I was actually there talking with students. And we didn't go there because of the neighborhood. We went there because, as you pointed out, the university has some facilities there. If you didn't know that, you're learning that from me. This is not the only university in the country that has a region close to it, a neighborhood close to it, that is dangerous for its students. Clearly, everybody in the country now knows of this region. They may not know it's called 5 Points, but they know of this. I'm going to say a couple things. First of all, I agree with you fully that this is an issue, the larger issue needs to be solved. We need to have an environment that is safe for our students and safe for the community that is more than just the students, it's the faculty and staff. There needs to be a clear conversation with the people who are involved in that neighborhood. And that conversation has to be one that is associated with how do we get this to stop. Having said that, you have a president now who is making this, from what I can tell, an important part of his agenda in the last few months. I am not going to stand here and say anything that in any way gets in the way of his actions. He knows this far better than I do, and he will have activity in this area for a while from what I can tell. So we can have this discussion in a few months if that's appropriate. Right now, I'm not going to go into any more detail than to say you've pointed out an important problem.
Thank you.
Dr. Walsh, we want to keep you on schedule. I don't know if you have time for one last quick question.
Good.
I'll make this very quick. So I know a lot of times, sorry, Christina with the library.
Hey.
I know a lot of times with presidents, you do want to leave a legacy behind. What would you like to see as your legacy?
Oh, that's a little early. Yeah, so a little bit, look, this is 4 or 5. I forget how many times I don't know, if I've said this before, I'm sorry. There are a variety of ways of leaving legacies. I've left legacies around Northwestern that I'm going to really be proud of and that things are going to endure long after I leave. There are master's programs within the engineering school that I set up a revenue sharing model, working with a prior provost. And that legacy will endure. That has helped an incredible number of students get master's degrees. It has also provided, candidly, revenue for the engineering school to move forward. We've built a research administration across the university that if their faculty who were here would, I explained this earlier, that allows the faculty to focus on that which we hired them for, teaching and research, and not doing a lot of administrative stuff. And you would think that's expensive, but the reality is that if the faculty do what they're hired for, then they actually generate revenue in other ways for the university that helps pay for that. I look to put in place infrastructure, administrative infrastructure, or buildings, we've also done those, or programs that will endure. I don't know what that's going to be right now, but as you can tell from what I just said, I'm very interested in moving forward with initiatives that will endure after I leave. If you want to call it a legacy, that's fine. I actually find that hard for me. I mean, personally, I just find that hard. I'm just happy that, should I leave Northwestern, those components that I put together will be there. And if I don't, I will continue to grow them. So it's an interesting question. I'll tell you eventually.
Dr. Walsh, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, all of you.
Thank you.